This is the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Steph Heinatz, founder of Consociate Media, a Virginia-based public relations and communications firm, cut her teeth as a newspaper journalist. Stephanie believes one thing: stories are the most powerful way to reach people and inspire change. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, great to have you on. So can you take us beyond the bio and tell us a little more about your background and what you do?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, whenever I talk about myself, I usually start and say I'm an Army brat. I had the pleasure of growing up with a dad who's a retired sergeant major, and learned at an early age the value of meeting new people and traveling the world and just being curious about things. I've lived in Virginia, since it's the early 90s after the Gulf Wars when we moved here. And I grew up in a small town, Gloucester, Virginia, not far from where you are in Williamsburg. And I studied literature and anthropology in college, and always knew growing up that I wanted to be a war correspondent, not really knowing what that meant. That was always a dream. But in college, I studied journalism and worked at several newspapers as an intern here in the Virginia Hampton Roads market, and after school landed a job as a reporter. My beat was the military. I joked that when the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, I was one of the people in the newsroom that knew how to read military rank, so that made me qualified to at least help with the war coverage. And from there, I went on. I was an embedded reporter in Iraq and Kuwait. I did some work as an international fellow. I won a fellowship to do some international work in East Africa. I worked in Ethiopia on assignment for a little while. And about 7 years ago, I left newspapers and I went into strategic communications for the military and did a lot of media training, which is a lot of PR training for senior ranking flag and general officers around the world. And then went into private corporation communications. And 4 years ago, we founded our firm, Consociate Media. I feel like I'm rambling, Chris. Like you got me on my little box, and I'm just kind of going on and on. But that's sort of my summary background. But when we founded the firm, Consociate, it was founded on the premise that stories, no matter what, stories is what helps enact change in this world. And I saw it as a reporter, because as a reporter, you investigate things or you tell the story of somebody inspiring, and you see the change that makes. Well, the same is true in business. You tell stories and it helps people become your client or your customer, or it helps, a cause reach more people. So that's really the heart of what we do, what I do, what we do.
That's very cool. Now, you wanted to be a war correspondent, huh?
I did. I have this distinct memory when my father deployed to the first Gulf War. We were living in Europe, and he was an Army aviator, and he left on Christmas Eve. And I just remember him leaving so distinctly, and remember not understanding why we couldn't go, because we always, went with Dad when he had to go on an extended trip somewhere. And the whole time he was gone, my mom read religiously the Stars and Stripes newspaper. And I remember reading reporters that were there with Dad. And maybe not him in particular, but I just remember that was how we got our news when Dad was deployed. And it was then that I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to go and report on what what the military is doing around the world. And I'll never forget when I became a young woman and was leaving for Iraq. I deployed with a unit out of Fort Eustis, Virginia, an Army unit. My mom and my dad and my husband all came to the deployment, and the last thing my mom said to me before I left was, "Don't forget, the families are going to read everything you write." And I always remembered that, because that was really the key of why I wanted to become a writer and go into journalism to begin with. Gosh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. Thanks for prompting that question.
Oh, no problem. And here I am thinking, your literature, you're wanting to be a war correspondent was all like Hemingway.
No, I do love me some Hemingway. I aspire to write like Hemingway. I mean, the power of him using so few words and getting such a powerful and poignant point across is, oh, it's so Hemingway. That's all you can say.
Right. Now, how has being a seasoned journalist benefited you as a PR professional?
Well, I taught a journalism class to middle school students this past semester at a small school in Gloucester. And the first day, I remember saying to them, and these were sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and I remember saying to them, I don't care if you don't even want to become a reporter or you don't want to go into the media, but the skills that you learn as a journalist carry you through any kind of job that you want to do. I have found that, and there are so many writers that we work with now that I say to my husband, who's also my business partner, I always say, gosh, I wish I could write like them. But I have found that being able to be a good, concise writer is not something everybody can do. Being able to be thoughtful and analytical and ask questions is not something everybody can do. Being able to go out to an event, somebody that you don't know, and to say, hi, I'm Stephanie, can I ask you a few questions? That's not something everybody's comfortable with. But as a journalist, you sort of learn to become comfortable with that, or at least the skill sets to get over sort of a fear and a hurdle. And I think that the way you're taught or trained to think as a journalist is really powerful across all industries, and being able to write again concisely is, I think a skill set that everybody should aspire to have.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think that, writing, I think we need to really put a premium on good writing because it takes you so many places.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's all I can say to that is yes.
Now, is there some sort of reason behind the name Consociate, or did you just kind of come up with that, or?
There is. And in fact, people ask us all the time, and I have to always give credit to my husband, Rudy, because he was the one who came up with the name. And he comes from a business background. So he always gets a lot of pleasure in knowing that was his big contribution in the very early days. But the dream was to create a firm that connects people to something through story. And consociate means to connect. At its very basic level, consociate means to connect. So we're connecting people through multimedia, through public relations.
I like that.
I do too. I feel really blessed that Rudy came up with that. And I still remember the day we were sitting at our dining room table and he says, how about consociate? And I said, is that a real word? It is a real word. This is what it means. And it just really stuck.
Yeah, no, I love the name. So.
Oh, thank you. I love the name Chris Jones Podcast. So.
Hey, thanks. All right. Now, in your bio, you talk about storytelling and the power of a brand story to create action within a consumer. As an author, how can I best tell my story to engage or elicit some emotion with people so that I get them to be interested in what I'm doing or be interested in my books?
I think as an author or as a business or as a cause, the first thing is to be completely and truly authentic to what you're doing. A lot of times in marketing, people are like, well, who's the target audience? What do you want to get them to do? We approach things a little bit differently. We say, what are your goals? What's your story? What's your background? What is the authentic piece of you? And that's the first step. And Chris, I have the pleasure of knowing you outside of this podcast. So, I am inspired by you and love what you're doing. And I mean, when I follow you on Instagram and the fact that you're inspiring people to write, just sit down and write, just get it out. Even if it's not what you want right away, like you can go back and polish it later, but just sit down and be dedicated to something. That to me is a powerful piece of what you're doing. So I always say, start with just sort of the authentic, what you're trying to get at. And build it out from there. I hope that doesn't sound too abstract, but when we sit down and meet with a new client for the first time, it's really a conversation. And we've had a lot of clients say to us, I didn't expect our quote unquote discovery session to go where it went. And I think it always does because we're looking for something a little deeper than I want to sell 100 million books. It's what is the actual change, what drives you? And I think people connect to that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that because when you tell your story because you know it so well, it's easy to get excited about it.
And people, I think, and people connect to that. People get, you want to be around somebody who's positive and excited and is charging ahead, and you generally want to learn more. I will say one of the benefits of working with somebody to help, figure out what your story is oftentimes people are so close to it. Like you're very close to your book and what you're trying to do. By having somebody come in and help you write that story, they're seeing a bigger picture. They're seeing generally where you fit into other storylines that are going on. And those fresh eyes and that fresh perspective, it can also be helpful.
Right. Now, for the benefit of just our listeners at large who may not know or understand the difference between PR and marketing, because people tend to interchangeably and incorrectly use those like they're the same. Just like they do advertising and marketing. People always, hey, advertising, marketing, despite the fact they're two different things. Can you tell us what public relations is and then kind of juxtapose it against what marketing is?
Sure. And I will say that they're used interchangeably, but even more so today than I think ever before. They 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 have to exist together. For me, public relations is quite simply the act of engaging with the public in some capacity. It's getting your story out into the public. And in today's world, that's the media, the mass media. It's magazines like the Health Journal or Virginia Living or newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, but it's also social media. And it's also what you have on your blog, and it's also how you interact with people or speaking events that you go to. It's just all of these ways that you interact with the public to build your brand, to build your story. Now, we work quite a bit with web developers, and we use a search engine optimization specialist, just as an example. And those traditionally haven't been public relations tools, but the world that we operate in now is today they have to be. So our firm, we are at the heart a public relations firm, a storytelling firm, and we're trying to get people's story out to a wider audience. The tools you have to use to do that today are very much marketing tools. If I'm getting your story in the Wall Street Journal, your website needs to be ready to see for traffic to come to it. If I'm blogging, you have to be search engine optimized to make sure that people are going to see it. So it's starting to be a little bit, I think, a little bit more interchangeable today because you have to use marketing tools, advertising tools to be able to do public relations effectively.
Wow, it's funny how just over probably like maybe the last 8 to 10 years how these things kind of meld together.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, I often, the example that I use often when I do speaking or training events is that I learned that the Washington Post was sold to Amazon by a Facebook post, not like a headline in the Washington Post or the, Washington Post online, on Facebook. Like everything is just so intertwined today that you have to have strategies to get your story out across all those mediums. The one thing that we often find that people have like their aha moments are that you speak differently on all those mediums, if that makes sense. So the tone of your writing in a blog post is often very different than your tone of writing in a press release or your tone of writing on Twitter or Instagram. It's the same story. It's the same authentic you, but because you're communicating in a different medium, your tone is a little bit different. So that's one thing, where you see things differentiating themselves, but at the end of the day, it's just all different ways to get your story out.
Now I'm glad you brought those up because I want to ask you about that with the different social media platforms, like in my continuous voice. Like, how do I like differentiate how I should post on Twitter, how I should post on Instagram, how I should post on Facebook, how I should post on LinkedIn? Like, because each audience is different. What should I do?
Sure. And I just have to tell you, I don't know if you could hear in your recording in the background, but there are dogs barking because I'm pretty sure they want their 15 minutes of fame on your podcast. So I apologize for that.
That's
But
A-okay. We're a dog-friendly show.
well, we are family first. So I am definitely, I've got the whole family here while we're doing this. In terms of the different tone and styles on the different mediums, I think you have to look first at how people use each medium. So when I'm on Pinterest, for example, I'm generally looking at things that I will probably never be good enough to do with my son, but I still like to go through there. So the context of how I'm using the medium is how we generally approach it. Let me see if I can explain that a little bit better. LinkedIn is very much a professional network. So you're going to be sharing things there that are very specific to people professionally. You're not going to post a recipe about how to redo your Starbucks latte, on LinkedIn, but you might do that on Pinterest. Um, I don't feel like I'm describing this well. It's one of those things that I think when you see something wrong that doesn't fit, you recognize it right away. Like if you're on Instagram and somebody's posting like a job description, that doesn't fit.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
would fit on LinkedIn. Now, if you're on Instagram and you post a picture of, Friday jeans day, or the dogs that are in the office on Instagram, that fits there. And now you're not necessarily hiring somebody on Instagram, but you're showing the culture of your company.
Right. Yeah, I find that with Instagram, people don't mind being marketed to on Instagram at all.
I think it's just such a fast medium that it's like candy.
Yeah.
I get addicted to Instagram. I know, Chris, I know when you're at Starbucks working on your book thanks to Instagram.
Exactly. But I see such a diverse range of posts, from personal posts to people pushing their products or their books or their services to, people posting, just witty memes or inspirational things. Like Instagram seems to capture people in ways that I don't think the other mediums do, but it's a completely different way of capturing them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I will just speak to the Consociate Instagram account. I posted today a picture because everybody loves pictures of food. I'm a total stereotype there. But I posted a picture of the fantastic lunch that I made thanks to Blue Apron for my husband and my son on Labor Day, that it was, nice to sort of kick back and have the afternoon to cook lunch for them. We also post pictures of our dogs in the office because we're a dog family friendly organization. But then we also post things that are, pictures of a newspaper where our client has gotten a front page news spread. So we're very much showcasing the culture of who we are and having fun with who we are, but also celebrating our successes as a company. And I just think that's a lot of fun. And that's still being authentically us. It's the different levels of us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So what services typically do most PR firms offer, or what services do you specifically offer?
We do a lot of, I think I will say a year ago, the reason people came to us is they would say, I need to be on social media to market my business. How do I do that? So that was what drove people to us in a lot of ways. And what we found was that there was a lot more that they needed to think about in terms of their communication plan. But today, people come to us because they say, I need to get my story out. I need to reach more people. And the services or the tactical ways we often deliver that service to clients is we do a lot of press release writing. We do a lot of copywriting for websites. We do a lot of blogging. We do social media management. We build websites. We have a graphic designer that she helps us take what we're putting in the written word and make it visual, because that's the medium some people, capture a story with. We work with a photographer on our team that when you need a really great portrait of yourself, sometimes that's the first impression people will have of you. I literally have seen people doing a keg stand as their LinkedIn portrait, and I'm just like, I just want to give them my business card and say, call our photographer. So it really varies. At the heart of it, and just what I've described, most of that is writing, and a lot of that, writing is the end product. The reporting, and I still say reporting, and the research and uncovering what the inner story is and how it connects to what else is going on. That's a big piece of what we do. When some of our companies have news happening, sometimes we recommend they wait to share that news until it makes sense to the media cycle, because the media still has a cycle today, even in this 24-hour, news world that we're living in. Um, but as I had mentioned earlier, just because of the way I think that PR has evolved, you have to have all of those things. You have to have a graphic designer or a photographer, and a web developer to be able to satisfy all of the needs, all of the ways that you want to get your story told. So we do offer that, but at the heart of it, we're writers and researchers and reporters.
Wow, that's a lot. But it's so cool. It's so cool because when you were spitting all those things out to me, I could see how all that stuff's intertwined. It's like a web of media,
It is. I might have to steal that, Chris. That's a great way to describe it. It definitely is. And one of the examples I've used with a few people is that there's this one company that we're working with, and the CEO is a true thought leader. I mean, he is challenging the status quo. He is challenging the way we think about things, the way we think about fear holding us back, the way we think about who millennials are and what they'll be doing in the future. And he's writing these really robust long form blog posts on his website. Now, he works in real estate. That stuff doesn't, on the surface, have anything to do with real estate, but it has everything to do with real estate. Now, one of those blog posts, one of those articles, I will probably go in and get the content from to create 100 different tweets. I'll use inspiration from that to create Facebook posts. I'll share that on LinkedIn. I'll send it to news media to say, hey, this guy's coming up and he's saying some really interesting things. If you're writing about X, you might consider interviewing him. So it really is a web of information.
That is so cool. I mean, and I think that's something that any author can take advantage of. Is, like you said, just taking excerpts from their book and tweeting those things out, or using them as like some of the memes we talked about on Instagram, or putting them out there on Facebook. It's such a brilliant strategy to be able to pull from your own writing and continue to repurpose it over and over and over to draw attention.
Absolutely. And the fun thing for us is what we're doing today is going to be obsolete in 6 months. I feel like there's like this 6 month cycle. Like it feels like not obsolete, but it feels like every 6 months something changes and updates. The media shifts, the social networks shift a little bit, what people respond to shift a little bit. People are so smart. Like they don't want to be sold. They don't want to, have something just blown over them. They want to engage. Like people really want that. And as we all evolve, so does the way we engage with them. So what we're doing today, I know is going to be different 6 months from now. And I think that's really exciting.
It is. It's a lot of fun to keep up with all the social media trends and, just all the marketing trends and the PR trends. So I'm totally on board with you on that. Now, I'm sure trust is a key ingredient to the health of a good PR client relationship.
Now, you could say that like 5 more times and it would.
I'm sure trust. No, I'm kidding.
It is such key. No, absolutely.
But knowing that, because I'm sure some clients expect results like pretty rapidly. They're like, okay, I've just paid you X amount of dollars. I expect to see something, in a month or 2 months. How do you manage client expectations?
That's an evolving one. That one's hard because there's some clients that go into working with a PR firm really understanding that you're building a foundation. You're building content on your website. You're introducing a company or an organization to the media. It is definitely a process. And then there's some clients that are like, I need this, in the magazine tomorrow. Now, if you are a very niche firm, like if you're an interior designer, there are PR firms out there that, have the editors of Architectural Digest, like on speed dial. That would be a good firm for you to work with. If you're working to get out into, mass media, getting in touch with, a firm that has journalists as their background, that would be a great firm to reach out to. I feel like I've started to ramble a little bit because I could talk on 100 different points on this topic alone. But when it comes to getting attention, and I'll just use mass media as an example, um, there's two things at play. One, building the foundation and then waiting for it to build, because it will build. If you have a great, authentic, good story, you will get traction. Sometimes it just takes time. And then the other piece is you have a big news event, and it fits right in the cycle, and you get your news out there. There's one client that we've been working with, and we worked for 8 months. And after 8 months, we had him in the Wall Street Journal, and he was in the print edition and online, and a Wall Street Journal photographer took his picture when he was in New York. That was a massive win for our client. Um, but that took us 8 months to do because we had to get all the things right. And the reporter that called us, actually, that wanting to interview this particular client, had held on to a press release we had sent to him 3 months before. And I always use that example because it's that foundation. He wouldn't have known that, to call this particular person about the story he was working on had he not received that press release 3 months earlier. Did that answer your question, Chris? I hope it did.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Just because, at the crux of it, you just have to be patient and build the foundation, right? Just it's a
Yeah.
commitment. Like it's not like a quick fix with PR. It seems that it's more of, okay, let me invest, 6 months, 9 months, a year, just so I get the results that I'm looking for and start to build the momentum that I need. Is that more of what it is?
It is. And I mean, now you have different levels of clients based on their budgets, what they can do. So working with a PR firm to help you come up with a plan, that's very good too. Maybe you don't have the budget to pay a PR firm just to be on retainer every month, but you want to get your story out, and at least working with somebody to say, what is my story? How would I get it out? Who would I get it out to? Tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's also a really good option. When you mentioned trust earlier, Chris, the other
Yes.
the other thing about that, and I know we take this so seriously, but anytime a company hires us, we feel like they've put us on staff. Like we represent them, and the the trust, like, that's humbling for somebody to say, I trust you to tell my story. I mean, we're talking about people's livelihoods. The money they spend on a PR firm is literally their blood, sweat, and tears. If they didn't spend it with, a PR firm, they'd be spending it somewhere else. And they're spending it hoping to grow their business, hoping to have their story told to grow their business. And when they grow their business, generally they support their community more, they create more jobs. This is this is heavy stuff for us. And so whenever somebody says, "Yes, we'd love to work with you," it 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 is like the ultimate saying, "I trust you to be part of my team." And that relationship, I just think, is so important.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Just and I want to go back to, you just mentioned just PR plan. Now, walk me through what an ideal PR plan would look like. If I was promoting, like I said, I'm a blog about writers. If I have a self-published book that I'm ready to promote, what would my PR plan look like if I turned it over to you?
Well, I think the first thing I would look at is the subject matter of the book, and the target audience, because that's going to be sort of the core of of who you're going to, the mediums you're going to get out to. But we usually look for themes. We look for key dates. We look at the media cycle, and we literally map it out in like a calendar spreadsheet format. Like, we know that this magazine publishes on this date of the month, and this particular issue is going to have a highlight on, emerging children's authors, or it's going to feature healthcare writers, or something to do with doctors. That kind of stuff goes into a plan. So we talked early on about, I don't want to say the abstract, but sort of like the heart and soul of PR, and that's who you are and what your story is, and what is, your authentic you and what you're trying to accomplish. But then when you get into the tactical execution, you got to map it out, like, cell by cell in an Excel spreadsheet. At least that's how we do it, because there is a little bit of a science to it. You want to get your story in front of the right person at the right time. that's going to move them to action. It's got to be the right story. So that's why that, that first part is so important. But yeah, a PR plan really goes at the different mediums. It goes at the, key dates. It goes after themes. And we layer those all together to figure out how and when and exactly you're going to execute each piece of it.
And what can go into it? Like, there's my press release. What are some of the components that are part of it?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for your book, I would be, I'm totally shooting from the hip here, Chris. And then you've already done a lot of this stuff, but I'd be launching my social media channels, months out and talking about the book writing process. So you're already way ahead of me on that one. But I would be planning press releases. I'd be planning on the different types of media that you can get out there on. So Goodreads and Amazon reviews, I consider those also social networks because people can do user generated content there. I'd be looking at getting some imagery done. And not just imagery of, the staunch, stand in front of a screen and here's your headshot, but who is Chris and who are the people he's related to? Sometimes I need to tell your story, but I'd be looking for good, crisp imagery. And I'd be blogging. I'd be blogging about all of the different things that are part of Chris that's going into the book. And then the other piece is we'd probably be looking at opportunities for speaking engagements. Where could an author go and present the book once it's out? Where can he talk to audience or she talk to audiences? And then every time you do one of those, there's another press release, there's another blog post, there's another series of social media posts to tell people what you're doing. And that was really just shooting from the hip. But those are some tactical things that we would look at employing.
I love that because it's like a continuous layering. Every time you do something, it's kind of a restart, regenerate, and it seems like every time you do that, it's like it's brand new. So the audience gets to start over and start fresh with you at another stage.
Absolutely. And they, your analogy earlier about the web, I mean, it all goes together.
Now, with PR firms, how do I find the agency that's right for me? Like, say I'm on Google, I'm scrolling down, and I find one in my area that I think that looks good. I've looked at their website. Are there some recommendations or some questions that I should ask when I'm interviewing a PR firm about myself or representing me?
I'm totally biased about this, Chris, but I like to know, that part of the team has had some sort of journalistic background. That's every writer that we work with has been in journalism in some capacity because I believe in that style of writing and that type, how those people came up, understanding the research and the reporting and the analytical thinking. But more than that, they understand how media works and how it evolves. So I think for us, that's a key piece. I would also ask about the plan. I would be wary about talking to a firm that just said, let me just put a press release together and we'll send it out. Well, how does it fit with everything else? Because things don't happen in isolation anymore. Those would be two key areas. And wanting to spend some time with, if you to call a PR firm and you are thinking about working with them, make sure that they want to spend some time with you going over a proposal. We spend a lot of time in development before we even put a proposal together for a new client, because I don't feel like we can say you should do this unless we know who you are. So trying to avoid sort of like cookie cut proposals, I think would be a good thing just to keep in the back of your mind as a writer.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense because you definitely want to work with somebody who, one, has your best interest in mind, and two, who's interested in what you're doing, interested in telling your story and getting it out.
Definitely.
Now, PR, of course, isn't a kind of set it and forget it thing. You put the plans together, you and your team will execute it. As a client, what is my responsibility? Because, it's funny, we get jaded by TV and we see people, I have a publicist doing all my work, but we know that's not true. We know that there's some footwork that we still have to do to promote ourselves. What is some of that?
Sure. Well, I can just speak from, from our experience, but being available to talk with your PR firm um, frequently, minimum of once a week, is really important. Things change in your business or in what you're doing. You may, add another chapter or decide that you're slightly shifting. Your firm needs to know that. So when you hire a PR firm, think of them as part of your team, and communicate with them regularly. We also like for our clients to be available to review and edit any of the pieces that we put together. And then, also industries are very different, and PR firms generally work across different industries. Um, and if there's something changing or happening in your industry, or you read like a really interesting news bit or something, um, in close communication is important.
Now,
To set it and forget it for sure.
right. Now, earlier we talked about kind of, well, you had mentioned just the cost part of PR. Now, is PR expensive, or are there inexpensive options that I can use that also can yield a good return for me, as opposed to maybe like you talked about before, having the retainer versus the pay as I go?
Sure. Well, I think it really depends on the amount of time that you're willing to put into it, versus what you're willing to pay for it. We work, like I mentioned earlier, we work with some clients where we develop the plan for them, and then every month we come in and say, "Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this?" Like, we're almost like a PR coach, because they have people on staff that they can execute it themselves, but just want to make sure they're doing all the right things at the right time. So that's one approach. Um, the other approach is, like you mentioned, sort of a retainer, and there's there's no set number. I can give you broad industries, standards of cost of things, but there's really, I hesitate to say a set number. If you're looking at keeping a firm on retainer just for minimal work every month, you probably want to look at budgeting at least $2,500 to $3,000 a month, and do it for a minimum of 6 months. That would be my recommendation. And that would likely include some press outreach, some blogging, and then some social media engagement as well. And actually, speaking sort of jumping back to one of your previous questions about questions to ask a PR firm when you interview them, ask them about results. How do you analyze or track your results and the effectiveness of what you're doing? I think that is really key as well. It's hard in marketing and it's hard in PR, but you got to find at least some way to do that so that you can know what's working and what's not.
Ooh, that's a great question. If we can kind of dig in a little bit, like analyzing results. So you send press releases. You're blogging, so of course you're going to be tapped into the analytics. You're going to be tapped into the analytic boards on Facebook and Twitter. Like, how did you guys measure all your analytics to display and show your clients that you're getting results?
All of what you just mentioned, for sure. We definitely look at the back end of websites and the analytics, not just how many people are coming to the site, but where they're coming from. We look at press releases that get picked up. We looked at shares for blog posts or other content that we're putting on the website, but we also look at media leads. So if we have a reporter that's, says, "Hey, this is interesting, you know, call me in a month," or I might want to do something on that. That's a lead for me. And we also look at, and this is my husband, Rudy. This is his influence on our company. We look at top line sales. So again, going back to that trust, if you bring on a PR firm, make them part of your team and give them some access to some of your back end business information. But are you making more money? Are you generating more leads? Are you selling more books? Those business figures are things that your PR team should have too, because if you're investing in PR, those numbers should be trending upwards as well.
Ooh, very good. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I come from this journalism, writing, creative background, and so when my husband, the MBA, it's like, okay, what are the top line sales? I was like, ooh, good one. This is why we're a good team.
Exactly. Now, you had mentioned before, you just kind of like the ballpark figures. Now, can I start small and gradually grow into a bigger budget program?
I think you can. I think PR is so individualized and personalized. It's got to be what works for you. And
Right.
the fact that the collective you, the fact that you are even entertaining the idea of hiring a firm, you're recognizing that you're busy doing what you do. You're writing. You're trying to finish a book, or whatever it is that you're trying to get out there, whatever the writing genre is. The fact that you even recognize that a PR firm could help you with that is a lot more than a lot of people, to be honest. And I would just be, when you interview a PR firm, be really honest up front. This is what I have to spend. Um, you don't want them to present you the Maserati if right now you're in the Volkswagen. I drive a Volkswagen, so I can use that analogy. Um, but just be really honest and upfront, and just say, these are what my goals are. This is who I am. What do you think we could do? There's a lot of things that you could do. We work for this startup casual apparel company, and they don't have a big budget. I mean, they are bootstrapping this company for sure. So we've come up with a plan that we help them put together a plan, but we're really focusing hard on their email marketing, their email communication, and we're focusing hard on their social media, because those are the from the analytics. We know that's where we're getting the most of their sales, but that's what they can afford right now. Now, would I really love to be, pitching, magazine writers and setting them up at different events? I'd love to be doing that. That's just not where they are right now.
And I love that you mentioned email, because that's, from webinar to webinar that I've listened to, and from podcast to podcast, they always talk about how building an email list is a smart way to sell your book from a public relations standpoint. Can you speak to that at all?
Absolutely.
And specifically, how to build an email list a smart way.
Don't buy an email list. That's number one. That's what I think most firms would recommend, not buying a list. But there's really great tools out there to do this. MailChimp is the one that I like a great deal. And start building the list by asking people to sign up. Put it on your website. Ask people to register. Put it on your social media pages. Ask people to register, and then give them something worth registering for. That is the key. I said earlier, people don't want to be sold. They want to be engaged. They want to hear a good story. They want to connect to you. If they signed up for your email, then there was a reason. They wanted to hear from you and be educated, or learn something. So give them that. That, to me, is the best way to build it. Is to give them something worth reading. There's one author that I subscribe that I'm thinking of in particular, Chris. He's a lot like you. He has a podcast. He's got a couple of books. He's very inspiring, and he sends out an email every Friday, and it's always my trigger to go download the latest podcast episode. And he also gives me the top 5 things from his week. It's like, this is the book I'm reading this week. This is the song I'm listening to on my workout. And I just love that. I've not unsubscribed. In fact, it's one of the emails on Fridays that I always read.
Ooh, that's really cool. Actually, it's different.
It's good. I like this particular one.
I like that, and I like brands, like you said. I like brands that tell stories. I think I gravitate more towards the people in the industry who are telling me stories, or giving me the inside look at their process, their office, their comings and goings. I think it does make a big difference, even in my own buying decision. I've noticed it.
So the fact that you can hear my dogs barking in the background on this lovely Monday evening is like the insider knowledge, right?
It is. They agree too.
They're part of the family.
Oh, all right. So let's kind of come in for a landing a little bit. We're going to talk just one more business section, which is really practical advice that people, our listeners, can apply right now if they want to. So one of the first PR tools is an effective and well-written bio. Can you offer some tips for writing a really strong author bio?
I would have a couple of author bios. depending on how you're using them. That would be my first tip, because you're going to be communicating on different mediums. So are you talking about your author bio for the jacket of your book? Are you talking about the author bio for your Facebook page? I would look at them in different ways.
Well, yeah, actually, my next question was going to be about social media profile bios, but if you want to talk about them all right now, I'm game. Let's do it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, I love it. I love it. You're thinking ahead. You're reading my mind. Go for it.
I would just say how I respond to bios, and I like the unexpected. I like to know that there's, like you just said, that little insider piece, like what moves you, what motivates you, what's that little nugget of why I want to read what you're writing. And it might not be that, that you, I'm not a book author like you are, but I'll use me as an example. It might not be that I founded this company, but it might be that as a little girl, I wanted to be a war correspondent because I wanted to go with my dad when he deployed. Like something unexpected and really personal, I think, is a great way to approach a bio. From a practical standpoint, write your bio, but give it to somebody else. Or ask, if you don't hire anybody to do anything else, hire somebody to write your bio, because they're going to see things that you probably don't realize are really spectacular about yourself, and they're going to pull them out better than I think we can do on our own.
Yeah, I think that's probably very true, considering the fact that most people always say, I don't like to write about myself. and so you do hesitate, and I think that hesitance does show up in your bios.
I think you're 100% right about that.
Now,
most people are humble by nature. So you're right. They hesitate to write the strongest points.
Yeah, and we're all so interested, such interesting people,
Oh my gosh.
We all have a story, and we all, just need to share something,
Amen. Yeah, I just, yes.
Now, Sprite, they coined that phrase, image is everything. Do you have some tips for professional headshots so that my image is everything?
Not a keg stand when you're in college. I like to have, for the clients that we work with, we like to get headshots in a couple of different settings. I really like headshots that are environmental, especially for authors. And I really love to have, that sort of that not straight on, but really well lit, traditional portrait as well. So in terms of image, I would consider doing both, just because you'll need them for different things. But I go back to the be authentically you. If you're writing a book about fitness, or we'll just say about fitness, should your headshot be of you in a suit and tie? Like, with your image, be authentically you, be the visual part of your story.
Ooh, I like that. Be the visual part of your story.
Oh, I should write that down.
Yes, me too. I love that. Wow. Good stuff. Now, all right, we're going to kind of wrap up. One last question for you in the business section here. Email subject line. Email signatures. Like, I feel like email signatures are such a great piece of like PR for you. How should I use my email signature to move people along to outlets where I want them to go?
Well, Chris, you have a great email signature. I can click on any of your social profiles in your email signature. I love that. I think that they should be sort of concise, just because I know for me, I generally am just going to reply. I think that they can still be creative to catch somebody's attention. And the example I always give when anytime email signatures comes up, Brent and Becky's Bulbs is this massive daffodil flower farm here in Gloucester, which is where we're located. I mean, international. They're amazing. If you haven't been there, you have been there. I've been there with you. But Jay Hutchins, who runs Brent and Becky's Bulbs, he's Becky's son. His signature line says he's the general manager And he gets more comments about that, he said, just because they have these really interesting titles and they do something fun and quirky in their email signatures. The fact that people notice that, I think, is a testament to that it's working. So for me, I would say keep it concise. Don't overload people with links, but still continue to share who you are that way. I like a logo in there every now and then too.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. Let's land this bad boy with some fun questions to kind of pick your brain and let your hair down now. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I could talk to you for a long, long time. This has been fun.
I know, right? All right. So basically, all these are going to be fill in the blank questions. So we're going to fly through these. It's going to be a lot of fun. Ready?
I think so.
All right. My favorite author is blank.
Toni Morrison.
All right. If I could only use one social network for the rest of my life, I would use
Instagram.
Why?
Because I like being able to take a bad picture and throw a filter on it, and then it looks like it's halfway decent. A photographer, I am not.
My superpower is...
I don't know. Wow, I really slowed us down there on that one. Yeah, I don't know, because like my brain went to the professional side and then also went to the personal side, and I was the first thing that popped into my head was my superpower was I could eat more popcorn than anybody else I know. It's my favorite food, but that's probably not what you were looking for. I think professionally, and I'm only saying this because my husband has commented when we've been on assignments together. I feel very proud that when I'm working or interviewing somebody, I can see what the bigger story is. Even if they don't see it, I can see it, and by the end of an interview, they start to see it come together. And I can eat a lot of popcorn.
Got to get the popcorn in there. My greatest accomplishment thus far has been...
He's 5 years old, and his name is William Heinatz, and he's amazing. He's my son.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
I can't live without my...
Would it be wrong to say Will and Rudy? They're my whole world. I've mentioned it several times in this podcast. We're very much a family first kind of organization, and we're founded on family values, and we run on family values. And gosh, if I didn't have my family, I think I'd be lost.
No, because again, we're back to what you said before. Be authentic, right?
Yeah. And popcorn. Yeah.
My go-to book on business or life is...
I don't have just one. Oh, I don't have just one. I'm thinking about what is on my coffee table right now. Right now it's a biography on Reagan, Jab, 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 Right Hook, and the 4-Hour Work Week, and all of which I've read before and I wanted to read again.
Nice. All right. The best advice I've ever received was...
Be yourself.
Yes, I like that. Keep it simple. And how can our listeners connect with you, Stephanie?
Oh, gosh. We are online at consociate.marketing. We are on Instagram at Consociate, on Facebook, Consociate Media, and on Twitter at Consociate Media. And gosh, pick up the phone too. I love a good conversation. My number at work is 757-713-2199. And if you can't reach me, call Chris, because Chris knows how to get in touch with me too.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for just adding so much value to this podcast today.
Oh gosh, I hope it was, and I just thank you for having me, Chris. I love working with you outside the podcast, and it's so exciting thinking about your book coming out soon, and so exciting watching your podcast become a reality, and it's really humbling to be asked to be part of it. Thank you.
Wow, what an inspiring episode. If you weren't able to take notes, I've got you covered. Visit my website at www.chrisjonesinc.com/podcast to get today's show notes, as well as access other episodes you may have missed. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast on iTunes. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.